Hello, and welcome to this 24th video in the series Reflections on the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, and we are looking at verses 1, 2, and 3. Now, with 23 videos behind us, if you want to know what this is all about, there is a introductory video. It's the first video in the YouTube list. It also just says introduction on it. And there are also the videos previous to this. It's not necessary to take them in order. It might be helpful at times when I refer back to certain items. But in general, they're pretty much meant to be standalone. Now, if you've watched any of the videos before, we place an emphasis on not letting the day's activities run into the next activity. It is it's modern society is the way to do. You know, people are doing this, that, and the other thing all at the same time. Unfortunately, a lot of times they're driving when they're doing these things. But be that as it may, this is our time to break with the franticness that we run around and live with. So I mentioned many times before the exercise from the School of Practical Philosophy, and I've also mentioned many times before there are apps on your phone, there are friends, whatever your method is of coming to rest for a while, this is what we're going to do for a bit. So just be aware. There's not. It's our natural state. Our natural state is one of rest. So just be aware if you're sitting in a chair or standing up or lying down, wherever you are, just be aware of your body. And let us just come to rest. Well, good, ladies and gentlemen. And as I have also said before, it would be useful to minimally do 2 to 3 minutes of just getting everything calmed down. I don't do that here because it's not very exciting video. All right, so if you've been following along, we are now on verse 3 of the Gita, and let's just remind you of the words, both one of which we've looked at and what we're looking at today. So verse 3 is as follows: energy, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, absence of pride. These belong to one born for a divine lot, O Bharata. And I'm going to, I don't think I did on the last one, read the commentary. So as you know, I work from a version of the Gita which has the commentary of Shankaracharya in it. And let's just take a quick look before we jump into the actual word. So the commentary for this verse is as follows. Tejas, which we looked at in 2 videos previous to this, means energy, not brightness of the skin. Forgiveness, which is what we're going to be looking at today, unaffectedness when beaten or reviled. We have explained absence of anger to mean suppression of anger when it arises. Thus, forgiveness and absence of anger should be distinguished from each other. Now, we already have done a whole video on absence of anger, and forgiveness will be one of the interesting things to compare the 2 videos and see what has come out of them. But here we are talking about a state where forgiveness is a action that you would be performing. Looking ahead, fortitude, that state of mind which removes the exhaustion of the body and senses when they droop down, and upheld by which the body and senses no longer get dejected. Purity, of the 2 sorts, the external and the internal, the one being accomplished by means of earth and water, or just go to any grocery store and restaurant and everybody's scrubbing away. Earth and water, of course, they may be called wipes or disinfectant, what have you, but they are essentially, yes, earth and water. and the one being accomplished by means of earth and water, the other consisting in the taintlessness of mind and heart. Let me just beautiful, beautiful phrasing. Taintlessness of mind and heart. In freedom from impurities such as deception and passion. And then moving on, absence of hatred, absence of a desire to injure others, and finally the absence of pride. Well, pride consisting in supposing oneself worthy of a high honor. We'll finish verse 3 with that. So that's the commentary, and it kind of gives, again, I'm doing word by word, but it is good to get a little bit of the context of all of this. Now, let me just move on. Last time we looked at Tejas, and this time, and again, come up with the cheap method of editing, we are looking at Ksham, which is forgiveness. Okay? And as at least as I've been doing in these, I think we'll start with the Sanskrit plus the definition, look at the roots, and then we see what comes from that. So Kshama, okay, forgiveness. Now Ksham is the root of that word. Look at some of the previous videos of, we looked at roots and prefixes and what have you. They're the same sort of thing in any language that you're dealing with. And here for Kshama, we are looking at Ksham, which is the root. I mean, it's the word itself, and it happens to be a root. Got that? Don't worry about it. Ksham, to be patient or composed, suppress anger, keep quiet, to submit to, bear patiently, endure, put up with, suffer, to pardon, to forgive anything, to allow, permit, suffer, to bear anyone, be indulgent to. Okay, so that's the word, and forgiveness certainly is in there, and we kind of get the idea of this, either patience, not being filled with anger, staying calm and quiet in a situation, and of course the forgiving. Now, even though this word is a root, as we've explained before in the Sanskrit dictionary, it's sometimes, literally going up the columns, okay, and looking at other words that either are a root of a root or in the same family of roots in this case. Now, the first one is ksha, which you would think would be the real root of this. But its definitions are a field, the protector or cultivator of a field, and a peasant. Couldn't get anything out of that one. We also have destruction of the world and lightning, and that didn't really seem to fit in with bearing patiently or enduring. But there was another root here also, kshi, okay? And let me just, again, we hold up here. Ksha and Kshi and their definitions, okay? And Kshi has two major definitions: to possess, have power over, rule, govern, be master of. Okay, maybe. And then finally, on the second definition of Kshi, we get to abide, to stay, dwell, reside, used especially of an undisturbed or secret residence. To remain, to be quiet, to inhabit, not inhibit, go, move, to make a person live quietly. Now, I again look at these things and I kind of have some idea. It's not completely just me talking and seeing this for the first time. I do let these things reflect in the mind a bit before I start speaking. It may not appear that way, but that does happen. Now, interestingly enough, and I do have some stuff set up to read here, when I think of a dwelling in a quiet and a peaceful place, and again, this kind of quietness, for you Lord of the Rings fans, I always think of Rivendell, and especially in the way that Tolkien does the story, Frodo has been stabbed by one of the formerly men, okay? Are they the Nazgul, or is that the flying thing? Doesn't matter. And he is brought in his terrible condition to Rivendell, and I think Peter Jackson and the whole staff and the set designers did a wonderful job of getting Rivendell down. It has this very, very peaceful quality. If you look at it, everything is beautiful. Everything is quiet. You get little waterfalls here and there. But in general, it's a place of rest and healing, although I do not see healing in here. But that was just one of the things that came to mind with this. So, yeah, how did we get to healing from forgiveness? It just comes up, and I think it's just because of this kind of root of quietness and bearing patiently and just waiting. Now, before we get into that, one of the things that I try to do is vary the reading. Certainly for forgiveness, there are a good 2 to 3 spots in the New Testament that speak directly to that, and I will get to that later. But again, I don't always want to jump into Christianity right away. I like to, as it were, let us see these from other points of view. Now, the one book that I've mentioned before is Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, and they have wonderful stories that are meant to get certain points across. They're meant, I mean, theoretically, they're meant to enlighten the mind, which, you know, in the second group of stories here, you know, just about everybody becomes enlightened like that. As I've said before, not quite as quick as that. On the other hand, it could be as quick as that. So I'm going to read this, because we're now going to kind of jump into the forgiveness aspect of this. And this is the tunnel. Zenkai, the son of a samurai, journeyed to Edo and there became the retainer of a high official. He fell in love with the official's wife and was discovered. In self-defense, he slew the official, then he ran away with the wife. Both of them later became thieves, but the woman was so greedy that Zenkai grew disgusted. Finally, leaving her, he journeyed far away to the province of Busan, where he became a wandering mendicant. To atone for his past, Zenkai resolved to accomplish some good deed in his lifetime. Knowing of a dangerous road over a cliff that had caused the death and injury of many persons, he resolved to cut a tunnel through the mountain there. By begging food in the daytime, Zenkai worked at night, digging his tunnel. When 30 years had gone by, the tunnel was long. I'm not going to give you the dimensions. 2 years before the work was completed, the son of the official he had slain, this is the son of the official he had slain, who was a skillful swordsman, found Zenkai out and came to kill him in revenge. The plot thickens. You know, my reading of these, so I have to interrupt. So, you know, a lot of these stories, and I happen to live near a Zen monastery at one point, and you get the idea, you know, speaking of quiet places, which, you know, that's what plays into it. You know, you think of people in robes and quiet, and I think there was a Xerox commercial with monks way back when, but you get this idea of this, and my reading of these Zen stories would either be considered very good or very bad, but in any event, keep it light, people, keep it light, okay? So 2 years, the son comes by, and he found out Zenki, and he comes to kill him in revenge. I will give you my life willingly, said Zenkai. Only let me finish this work. On the day it is completed, then you may kill me. So the son awaited the day. Several months passed, and Zenkai kept on digging. The son grew tired of doing nothing and began to help with the digging. After he had helped for more than a year, he came to admire Zenkai's strong will and character. At last, the tunnel was completed, and the people could use it and travel in safety. Now you may cut off my head, said Zenkai. My work is done. How can I cut off my own teacher's head? Asked the younger man, with tears in his eye. Now, I've said on many of these videos before that this is not about, you know, however however nice and pretty, we can thank PowerPoint for this, and however good the Sanskrit fonts are out there, and however good my reading through the Sanskrit dictionary and getting this stuff on to paper are, there's another Zen story which says, it's good. It's like the boat to take you across the river. It's good for a bit, and then you take it, and you once it's done its work, you throw it away. And although it is useful to hear these sounds for all the reasons I've given before, forgiveness, honesty, compassion, fearlessness, everything we've talked about are meaningless unless put into action. Everybody says all sorts of things, but when it comes to, now we'll talk specifically about forgiveness, is it really happening? And so this particular story here, a marvelous story of many things, but of forgiveness in action, and talk about a situation where keeping calm, being patient, bearing the burden, really for both parties. I mean, there was a bit of forgiveness on the part of the son of the official, but more so just a willingness on the part of Senkai to excuse me, to understand that the person had a legitimate grievance against them. So far we spent, I'll always look at the little clock here, we spent a good 15 minutes kind of getting to a little bit of what forgiveness means in definition and what it might mean in action. And as we've said many a time here, they may be called the godly qualities, the spiritual qualities, but these are really the qualities that when practiced, when put in action, these define what it means to be human. Anybody can have a human body. There's whatever the current number is, 7 billion of them running around on the earth right now. But having a human body and knowing what it means to be human are two different things. There is I would have to have a pile of books here, right, because I can't remember everything, but I would have to have a pile of books to read some of the examples out. And one of them is from the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, where some of the animals have gone wild. I mean, in that story, if you know it, the animals are talking animals. They are essentially humans, but in animal form for purposes of the story. However, as was said, they could easily revert back to their non-talking animal state. And Lucy asks Aslan at one point, well, what would happen if we couldn't, what would it be like if one of the animals appeared to be a talking animal, but in fact had reverted back to their animal state? And so let's leaving Narnia aside, what does it mean to have people in a human body not acting humanly? And people would say, well, that's ridiculous. You got a human body, you're human. And my contention from looking through all of these is human body isn't enough. It's the starting point. It is the instrument with the greatest potential to realize each of these qualities in fullness, in action, in a way. And then we'll jump into Christianity. I mean, Christianity certainly doesn't have this now. The church, at least any church that I've been to, is looking for sheep. Okay. Jesus said to his disciples, basically you could do what I've done and more. Which is pretty impressive, okay? Not current Christianity, but it gives you a hint and a direction of what is possible. What is possible? And of course, the question, as I always say, and the question is, are you just hanging around, eating pizza and drinking beer, which I do too, but that's not the only thing. are these qualities being manifested? Because then when we talk about these belong to one born for a divine lot, we're talking about a person living at a rather good state of being. And so coming back again specifically to forgiveness, and we have talked about, it's been impossible to do these videos and not talk about purity of heart and cleansing of heart. How, people ask, well, how did we get to that state? Well, this one is perfect, not forgiving anyone or anything. In fact, these last ones that we're getting to are, in a way, describing the things that are the building blocks of the impediments, of the impurities, of how do we get to hatred and anger and a lack of compassion and all that. And here, and the word bear patiently, if anybody were going to 100 years from now look back and say, well, what did America look like in the late 1900s, early 2000s? Were they a patient lot? And people, wasn't a very patient lot at all. It's like zoom, 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 out of my way, get going here. Maybe I should video this, but then I'd have to learn how to work this in. Summertime, go to a supermarket, go to a farm stand, and just go to where the fresh corn is, okay? Now, it used to be, back in my day, that you bought corn and you took it home. And then people didn't want to get it home and find out. This is corn straight, right from the stalks there, so it's still all, if you will, wrapped. Well, people said, well, why should I buy it and bring it home and find out it's no good? And I think it's been 20, 25 years that supermarkets now put containers, because people started ripping up the corn and ripping that off and leaving it there anyway. And they said, well, instead of cleanup, we'll give them baskets. But just go to any supermarket, any farm stand now, and just watch how people rip apart, and boom. There's no joy in Mudville. There's no joy in Cornville. It is. I called it a raping of the corn. I mean, it is just, and that's indicative, in my opinion. I always say my opinion. It's indicative of where we're at, and one just needs to just pick up any newspaper and look at, if they're not ripping apart the corn, they're ripping apart each other on the road, and so on. Now, okay, so we kind of diverted a little bit on that, but the point of the matter is that bearing patiently, suppressing anger, keeping quiet, these are the qualities that can lead to forgiveness and helping to clear out the heart. Because this other one, this constant grudge, this constant anger, this constant, somebody slighted me in some way or another, is the building blocks of a hateful heart. And as I have asked many times in this, why do you want a hateful heart? And people say, well, it's my right. He did this to me. She did that to me, blah, 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 And I've said enough about that sort of attitude that I don't need to repeat that here. But if anybody wants to know how you get to the state where you cannot even forgive anybody, this is how it starts. You can't keep quiet. You can't forgive. You can't be patiently. You can't endure. You can't suffer anything. You can't bear anything. It comes back to what I said about the weakness. Not only are we now so weak, that every single thought that zips by in the mind, as I say, squirrel, I mean, there's no self-control whatsoever. There's no ability. There's no strength to bear anything. I know the phrase is snowflakes right now. I think snowflakes are stronger than most people at this point. We have lost our ability to suppress our anger, to keep quiet, to be patient, It's all gone. It's gone. It is not practiced. People just don't practice forgiveness. It's slightly different than modesty. When I looked at this word, I was like, oh, great, this is going to be like modesty, which people are like, yeah, you got to be kidding me. Forgiveness, people are aware of the word. They just think that, once one thinks that they are right all the time, well, what do I have to forgive somebody for? It was their fault. The great they that we're dealing with. Remember, right before elections in 2020, they, who, they, okay? The great they that we cannot forgive. So people, we're looking at forgiveness here. We're looking at the harsh side of it right now. We've actually been looking mostly at not forgiving. As you know, I always do a break for part 2. And I think what we'll do when we come back is, now that we've seen how we get to this state, let's go in part 2 and see what happens when practicing of forgiveness, the ability is there. The strength is there. Okay? So as you know, I put this on pause for a bit, give you a few seconds. It says part 2. I take a drink of water or coffee or whatever. I look at this a little more. We'll be back in a few minutes or a few seconds for you. Hello, and welcome back to the second half of this video. We are looking at the Bhagavad Gita chapter 16. We are on verse 3, and we're reflecting upon the word forgiveness. Now, the first half of this video, we kind of looked around the word, both at what it might mean or what non-forgiveness might look like. In this second half of the video, I am going to jump into Christianity, the New Testament, because there's actually a few instances where forgiveness is either mentioned or looked at very specifically, including one of them which I had to go looking up. So let's take these in order as we look at this whole idea of forgiveness. Now, the one place that even non-Christians might know about forgiveness is in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Okay, and that's, if you will, fairly straightforward in that, whether inadvertently or advertently, if that's the word, we do things in life and we trespass upon people in many ways. It's not just on their property. It's, whether it's inappropriate questions, behavior, certainly actual trespassing on their property. But again, almost all of these things are, of the heart and of their mind. How are we treating other people? And so that one's an easy one. We want to be forgiven in the same way. Well, we need to forgive, in the same way we would like to be forgiven. A second version of this is given in a parable of it's usually always, some king or prince or somebody owner of a place who has servants. And in this case, the servant came to owe a certain amount of money. And, short story, begged and pleaded with the king or the prince. And the king or the prince forgave the servant. I don't know if he forgave all of it or a portion, but basically showed mercy, showed forgiveness. Now, the servant, or maybe it had been a portion, because the servant had to still go out and kind of get some money to be paid, and then went out to all the people that he had dealt with demanding money. Now, these people who demanded money out of more or less said the same story back to him that he had said to the king, which is, please, hold on, I'll do this. And he ill-treated them, did not forgive them. And as it happens in these stories, word got back to the king, and the king pretty well, how dare you? I showed you forgiveness, and you could not show forgiveness to others around you. I don't remember what happened, because it's not important. We need to get the ideas here of that if we expect to be treated in a certain way, the first thing that has to happen is we ourselves need to practice that type of treatment. I mean, we may be lucky and happen to live surrounded by saints. I mean, we talked about a Zen monastery before. We may be in a near utopian community, but I don't think most of us are near such a thing. But whatever the case may be, it's pretty clear from that parable that it is expected as a practice. And if you consider, again, I'm still staying in Christianity here, if you consider Jesus as a model of what it means to be a human being on this planet, okay, forgetting about the divine part, let's just say, what is the action of a person? What would we be emulating? Then, that story kind of says it all on the subject of forgiveness. If we are being forgiven, that has to be passed on. And in fact, isn't it pay it forward or something like that? But just like care and just like honesty, this is how either we don't start things in the heart or we help clean them out. All of these qualities that we are talking about, and again, I realize, a lot of, Bible belters are not going to be picking up the Bhagavad Gita. That's pretty well, a book to be burned. But if you are open enough, if you are pure in heart enough, if you are intelligent and wise enough, it doesn't matter where good advice comes from. Take it, okay? I've been mentioning the various interviews of Dan Rather has done this series for a number of years, and he talks to various people. I already told you one of the things that Emmylou Harris said about grace, and he's interviewing Dolly Parton, and he said, well, how do you feel about Whitney Houston? Kind of people think of, I can't remember the name of the song here, I Will Always Love You, as her song. And she said, I don't care if they think of it as her song as long as the cash comes my way. Now, some may consider this alone a blasphemous reading of this, but the fact of the matter is, if literally and this goes back to the whole grace thing, when people say that their life is cursed and they don't have the advantage and how unfair it is. It's not unfair at all. But if you are going to only look, I don't know if I could do it, if you're going to look at that, and the whole wide world is out there, people, and then you're going to complain about lack of grace, shame on you, okay? Open your eyes. That's what Jesus was here for. Cure the blind and cure the deaf, okay? Open your eyes, open your ears, listen, and forgive, okay? Listen, forgive, see, forgive, be honest, every single one of these words. And if I have to read them out of the Bhagavad Gita, well, that's where they're coming from. If I read it from the poems of Rumi or from a Zen story, that's where it's coming from. The demands that we place on the creation are laughable, and in fact they're sinful. I haven't been writing them down, but going back to what is sin, right? Because I've had to have a very, very good friend and I do this conversation about what is sin, and it's not like, I thought bad thoughts of this one or that one. Sin is demanding that the creation has to conform to you. It's not that way, people. You are part of the creation, but you're basically going and wagging your finger at God and going, well, you didn't do it the way I wanted it to be done. Welcome to the world, people. And so this forgiveness, this bearing, this quietness, this patience would be a wonderful I know we started with fearlessness, and that's useful. We did purity and honesty and stuff. But honestly, people, here's a good starting point. If you are as weak as we generally are right now, well, start by being quiet for a bit. That's why we start each of these videos with a bit of a pause in there. You got to quiet it down. Let's just get quiet for a minute. And that's always the first, I don't care if you look at an old Western movie or stuff like that. If you're trying to break up agitation and fight, it's like, okay, everybody, okay, calm down. Yeah, that's how we start. Very simple. So now you can't even say nobody told me what to do, okay? Instructions, the creation is unbounded in its generosity. But again, if you're only looking, I have to come up with maybe a little icon. If you're only looking at that, that's all you get. If you're only letting in that much, as I've said before, there's nothing. You have the power. And if your power you want to confine down to this little teeny bit, it's your choice. It's your ability. I don't know if it's your right, because we talked about you need to perform your duty before you get some rights. But let's see, can we? Simple. How about a little forgiveness? How about a little patience? How about a little enduring and bearing? And everyone goes, but it's the other way. Okay, maybe. But why don't you be the one who takes the lead and keeps it quiet, keeps it patient, and bears with it, and is able to forgive? Because I will assure you, as sure as you're watching this, I'm now up to 3. I counted. We have 2 cats. I count them as a half, so it's 3 people watching this. Okay, I assure you, as far as that big audience is concerned, that as a starting point, just start there. People, well, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Start there. Open your eyes, look, and listen for a little bit. It's kind of laughable for me to say after 24 videos of this, the world doesn't need to hear from you. But yes, it doesn't need to hear from you most of the time. But every once in a while, if it is useful, if it is non-harmful, if it is coming from honesty and truthfulness, well, then, yeah, that might be a time to say something. But if all that you are doing is holding tight, what do you think there's so many heart attacks for, people? Our hearts and our minds. I mean, I don't know if I can do enough of a fist for this, of how tightly everybody is wound right now. Literally, tapping somebody on the shoulders could get you shot, okay? Now, again, that's partly because people think to their bodies, and, the amount of people who I've seen, don't touch me, you don't know me and stuff like that. It's true. You shouldn't go around and be doing that. But it's also not the end of the world either. But in any event, forgiveness, patience, keeping quiet opens up a bigger world. And I didn't see, again, this is what I say about, I don't know, even though I look at this ahead, I don't know where this is going to go. But if somebody had said to me, well, does forgiveness mean that you start to open up to the world around you? I would have said, well, I don't know. But having now spent the time that we have, I think that's one of the things that reflection on this word is pointing to, that this is the entrance to just wider, more open, more encompassing, hopefully more loving. Because if my world is this, right, this teeny little thing, I'm just looking around with some of the junk I have here to see, to get myself a little Lego figure. If your world is that small, it's probably filled with misery, because if that's you, and then everything is the great them, as we constantly hear, at least here in America, the great them and they and those people and whatever. As long as that them is almost infinite, because you're working down here, it's going to be a pretty miserable and unforgiving world. And honestly, I would have to question whether we need any more people who are bound up in a teeny, teeny, tiny world. C.S. Lewis, who I've mentioned a lot, if you ever read The Great Divorce, which I do highly recommend, the short version of what I'm aiming at here is that hell is very small. It's this teeny tiny little close-fisted, tight-hearted world. It's very small. If you want to, you can leave all of that. And one way you leave all of that is you both ask for pardon for what you've done. Again, we always said, your quote loved ones are the ones who always bear the brunt of your tight-fistedness, unforgivingness, unwilling to bear anything. So, all right, you don't have to go from here to the entire creation. How about be kind to your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, the children, the animals, the neighbors, the community, the nation, the world, the creation. You can get there. I mean, we can take the steps. But so long as this tightness, it is a wonder that there aren't more heart attacks, because the tight-fisted, I mean, let it go. Let it go. Let it go. You're not in charge of the creation anyway, okay? Trust me, you're not. I speak from experience. Be patient. Be quiet. Forgive. And this doesn't mean, because there's a lot of snarkiness in forgiveness. I mean, there are people, well, I forgive you. Yeah, thank you for your sincerity, okay? I don't mean that kind of fake forgiveness that's a dismissal. I mean literally that it's forgotten. It's gone. It doesn't say that here. Dwell, remain quietly. But, that it's as if it never happened. That's true forgiveness. And that's why in the commentary at the beginning, I keep turning away. Unaffectedness when beaten or reviled. Most of us, fortunately, although these days it's getting tougher and tougher, are not being physically beaten or shot at. But again, that's changing too. But, in whatever way we feel that we've been slighted, that's what we're talking about here. Not meeting hate with hate, not meeting anger with anger. But again, going back to the Christian, turn the other cheek. And it's a tough pill for some people to swallow. It is, almost an absolute refusal and something. I'm going to get even. Well, yeah, you're getting even because you're sinking down to that level. These all turn into pleas, PLEA. And please too. But the amazing thing is to have to actually come out and say this. It should be part and parcel of being a human. But to kind of bring that around to full circle again, just because you're in a human body does not mean you are playing that part. You could be playing the part of a snake or a scorpion, a wolf. I mean, there's a lot of people, oh yeah, there's a real snake in the grass, okay? Let's up, okay? I think I've got my point across here. Again, it's always interesting how each of these come out. I you may not believe it, but I do attempt not to be too preachy in these. And yet, given current conditions, I don't see how it's not possible for some of that to kind of come in. I mean, most of what I've read, as I said, should be part and parcel of your upbringing, of how you interact with the world daily. For anybody to have to come in and have to read this and go, like you're dealing with a bunch of kindergarten children. Okay, remember, people, stop beating everybody up, stop shooting everybody. Don't hold a grudge for 30 years in your heart against this one because they said something to you. I mean, that list is endless, and it's deadly. It's death to you, and it's harmful to everybody else. So let's flip it around. Patient, bear it, forgive it, okay? And see what happens. Okay. Uphill battle. It should not be an uphill battle, people. I long for the day when, we can just strike this out and say, yeah, could you believe it? Now, of course, that day in one way is never going to happen. But there can be more or less a move in certain directions. So, with that said, treat everyone as you would wish to be treated. Forgive everyone as they are forgiving you, and even if they're not forgiving you, you start first and set the example, okay? And where we seem to have general agreement, and don't forget, there are plenty of cat videos out there on the internet, and till next time, enjoy.